I would never hurt my wife Maggie, and I would never hurt my son Paul. These words, spoken by Alex Murdaugh during his trial, echoed through the courtroom, a desperate plea from a man accused of unthinkable crimes. But behind the mask of a respected attorney, web of lies, betrayal, and murder began to unravel. How did a member of South Carolina's most prominent legal dynasty end up on trial for the brutal murders of his own family? And what secrets lie buried in the legacy of the Murdaugh name? The answers to these questions are as shocking as the crimes themselves. This is the case of Alex Murdaugh. Hampton County, South Carolina, a quiet region where tradition and influence have long shaped its history. For nearly a century, one family stood above the rest, the Murdaughs. With 3 generations serving as solicitors, the Murdaugh name became synonymous with power and influence in the Lowcountry. They controlled the legal system, prosecuted cases, and built an untouchable legacy. But behind their carefully crafted image lurked dark secrets that would one day come to light. At the center of it all was Alex Murdaugh, a successful attorney and the latest heir to the family's empire. To the outside world, he appeared to have it all: a sprawling estate, a loving wife, Maggie, and 2 sons, Buster and Paul. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. In June 2021, those cracks shattered when Maggie and Paul were found brutally murdered on the family's hunting property. The gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through South Carolina and quickly placed Alex at the center of a spiraling investigation. This case is more than a tale of murder. It's a story of betrayal, greed, and the collapse of a dynasty that once seemed invincible. We'll uncover the Murdaugh family's rise to prominence, examine the evidence against Alex, and follow the twists and turns of the investigation and trial that gripped the nation. This is the story of how one family's legacy unraveled under the weight of secrets too dark to hide. A family whose roots run deep in South Carolina's legal system. For nearly a century, the Murdaughs held a near monopoly on justice in the Lowcountry. Beginning in 1920, Randolph Murdaugh Sr. became the first in the family to serve as the solicitor for the 14th Judicial Circuit, a powerful position that gave him authority over criminal prosecutions in 5 counties. His son, Randolph Murdaugh Jr., and grandson, Randolph Murdaugh III, followed in his footsteps, continuing this legacy for 87 consecutive years. The position of solicitor wasn't just a job for the Murdaughs, it was a dynasty. They weren't just lawyers, they were gatekeepers of justice, deciding who would face trial and who wouldn't. With this power came influence, and with influence came privilege. Their name carried weight in courtrooms, boardrooms, and backrooms alike. But the Murdaugh legacy wasn't confined to the courthouse. They owned vast tracts of land in Hampton County, including the sprawling Moselle estate, nearly 1,800 acres of hunting grounds, fields, and woods. It was here that the family entertained friends, hunted game, and, on the surface, appeared to live the idyllic southern life. Yet, behind the gates of Moselle, there were signs that all was not as it seemed. By the 2010s, Alex Murdaugh, Randolph III's son, had become the family's most prominent figure. He was a partner at the prestigious family-founded law firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Eltsroth and Dietrich, or PMPD, and a well-known figure in Hampton County. Outwardly, Alex appeared successful, a wealthy attorney, a devoted husband to Maggie, and a proud father to Buster and Paul. But beneath the surface, cracks in the Murdaugh empire were beginning to show. In February 2019, those cracks became visible to the entire community when tragedy struck on the waters of Beaufort County. Paul Murdaugh, then 19 years old, was allegedly intoxicated while driving the family's boat late at night with 5 friends on board. The boat struck a bridge piling, throwing several passengers into the freezing water. 19-year-old Mallory Beach did not resurface. Her body was found days later. The aftermath of the crash was devastating, not just for Mallory's family but also for the Murdaughs. Paul was charged with 3 felony counts of boating under the influence, but rumors quickly spread that the Murdaugh name was shielding him from accountability. Witnesses claimed that Alex and Randolph III arrived at the hospital that night, attempting to control the narrative and protect Paul. The boat crash became a turning point for the Murdaugh family. For the first time, the public began to question their influence. Civil lawsuits followed, with Mallory Beach's family suing Alex Murdaugh for damages. These lawsuits exposed Alex's financial troubles that had been brewing for years. By 2021, Alex's financial house of cards was collapsing. Investigators later discovered that Alex had been embezzling millions of dollars from his law firm and clients. These stolen funds were used to fuel a lavish lifestyle, luxury vacations, private school tuition, and everything in between. The law firm eventually confronted Alex, forcing his resignation in September 2021. And then, there were the mysterious deaths connected to the Murdaugh family. In 2015, 19-year-old Stephen Smith was found dead on a rural road not far from the Murdaugh estate. His death was ruled a hit-and-run, but rumors swirled about a possible connection to the Murdaugh family. In 2018, Gloria Satterfield, the family's longtime housekeeper, died after an alleged fall at Moselle. Alex later faced accusations of stealing settlement funds meant for her family. By the summer of 2021, the once untouchable Murdaugh dynasty was under siege from lawsuits, criminal investigations, and growing public scrutiny. Yet, nothing could have prepared the community for what would happen next. June 7, 2021. It was an ordinary summer evening in the Lowcountry, quiet except for the sounds of crickets and the occasional bark of dogs near the kennels on the Murdaugh family's 1,700-acre estate. But by the end of that night, the tranquility of Moselle would be shattered forever. At 10:07 p.m., a frantic Alex Murdaugh called 911. His voice trembled with panic as he told the dispatcher, "I need the police and an ambulance immediately. My wife and son have been shot badly." When law enforcement arrived at the scene, they were met with a horrific sight. Near the dog kennels, the lifeless bodies of 52-year-old Maggie Murdaugh and her 22-year-old son, Paul, lay on the ground. Maggie had been shot multiple times, with wounds to her torso and back. Paul's injuries were even more gruesome. A fatal shotgun blast had caused catastrophic damage to his head and chest. Blood pooled on the concrete floor, mixing with the muddy ground of the kennel area. Shell casings were scattered nearby, and two distinct types of ammunition were found at the scene. Investigators quickly determined that two firearms had been used, a rifle for Maggie and a shotgun for Paul. This chilling detail suggested a deliberate and calculated attack, but it also raised an unsettling question: were there multiple shooters, or had one person brought two weapons to carry out the killings? Alex Murdaugh told investigators that he had discovered the bodies after returning from visiting his mother, who lived about 20 minutes away. According to his account, he had tried to call both Maggie and Paul earlier in the evening but received no response. He said he had left the house earlier to check on his mother, and upon returning home, he found the horrifying scene. But Alex's account raised questions. Investigators noted that Maggie's phone was found abandoned on a nearby roadside, and initial analysis suggested it had been thrown there. Paul's phone, however, was still on his body. Forensic evidence also pointed to strange details about the timeline. Data from Paul's phone showed that he had been alive and active as late as 8:49 p.m., sending a Snapchat video to a friend just minutes before the murders. This digital clue, combined with other evidence, suggested the crime occurred between 8:50 and 9:06 p.m., leaving a narrow window of time. Yet, despite the horror and the urgency of the investigation, there were no immediate suspects. Alex Murdaugh claimed he had no idea who could have committed such a heinous act. The community was left in shock and fear, grappling with the possibility that the killer, or killers, might still be at large. Initial reports described the crime as an execution-style killing, fueling speculation that the murders were a targeted act of revenge. Could the killings be linked to Paul's legal troubles stemming from the 2019 boat crash that had claimed Mallory Beach's life? Some wondered if an enraged member of the Beach family or their supporters might have sought revenge. Others speculated about the Murdaugh family's long history of influence and power. Had Alex or his family made enemies over the years who might have sought to bring down the once untouchable dynasty? The questions multiplied, but answers remained elusive. Meanwhile, forensic teams scoured the crime scene for evidence. Blood spatter analysis, ballistic testing, and DNA samples were meticulously collected. Investigators hoped the physical evidence would provide a clearer picture of what had happened that night. But then came another twist. While processing the scene, investigators noticed that Moselle's main house was pristine, with no signs of a break-in, struggle, or blood transfer. This raised another haunting question: how had the killer, or killers, committed such a brutal act and left no trace inside the home? In the weeks that followed, the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh gripped the nation. The lack of immediate suspects, the high-profile nature of the family, and the chilling details of the crime created an atmosphere of unease. The Murdaughs, once seen as pillars of their community, were now at the center of a mystery that seemed to grow darker with each passing day. As investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the events of June 7, 2021, one thing was clear: this was no random act of violence. The answers lay somewhere within the secrets of the Murdaugh family and their troubled past. But uncovering those secrets would take months of painstaking investigation, and reveal more than anyone could have imagined. The crime scene at Moselle marked the beginning of a story that would shock the nation, expose hidden truths, and ultimately lead to one of the most sensational trials in modern history. The investigation into the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh began the moment Alex Murdaugh's panicked voice came through the 911 dispatcher's line on June 7, 2021. "My wife and child have been shot badly," he cried, his words rushed and trembling. Within minutes, deputies from the Culleton County Sheriff's Office arrived at Moselle, greeted by a scene of unimaginable horror. Maggie lay face down, just feet away from the dog kennels, shot multiple times with a .300 blackout rifle. Paul was found nearby, his body slumped in a pool of blood, the result of a fatal shotgun blast. The sprawling estate, usually quiet and serene, was now a hub of flashing lights, forensic teams, and grief-stricken cries. As investigators processed the scene, they collected key pieces of evidence: shell casings, footprints, and blood spatter. Early on, one unsettling detail became clear: 2 different firearms had been used in the murders. This unusual factor led to questions. Was this the work of 2 attackers, or had one killer methodically switched weapons to carry out the crime? Alex told investigators that he had been visiting his mother at the time of the murders, a fact he repeated several times in his initial interviews. He described coming home to find his wife and son's lifeless bodies and immediately calling 911. On the surface, his account seemed plausible, until investigators began to dig deeper. Forensic evidence and digital data soon began to poke holes in Alex's alibi. Paul's phone revealed a critical clue: a video taken at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before investigators believed the murders occurred. The video, recorded near the kennels, captured the sounds of dogs barking and Paul's voice. But it wasn't just Paul's voice that could be heard. A third voice was present in the recording, one that would later be identified as Alex Murdaugh. This revelation contradicted Alex's claims that he wasn't near the kennels that evening. The video placed him at the scene just moments before the killings, raising serious questions about his involvement. But the video wasn't the only piece of evidence that raised suspicion. Investigators discovered that Alex had a troubling financial history, one that was beginning to unravel. Just days before the murders, his law firm, Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Eltsroth and Dietrich, confronted him about missing funds, millions of dollars that Alex had allegedly embezzled from clients and the firm itself. Could Alex's financial troubles have been a motive? Prosecutors later suggested that the murders were part of a desperate attempt to gain sympathy and distract from his financial crimes. But for investigators, the Murdaugh family's long-standing influence in the community posed an additional challenge. The Murdaughs were a family of solicitors, their power and connections stretching back nearly a century. Some feared that their influence might hinder the investigation. Others believed that law enforcement would be under immense pressure to deliver results quickly, given the public scrutiny surrounding the case. And scrutiny there was. The murders of Maggie and Paul thrust the Murdaugh name into the national spotlight, with headlines speculating about everything from revenge killings to conspiracy theories. The pressure on investigators mounted as the case became a media frenzy. Then came the turning points. Forensic evidence began to build a timeline of events that didn't align with Alex's story. Gunshot residue was found on Alex's clothing, suggesting he may have been in close proximity to a recently fired weapon. Additionally, investigators discovered that the .300 blackout rifle used to kill Maggie matched the type of firearm owned by the Murdaugh family, though the weapon itself was missing. But perhaps the most damning discovery was the video from Paul's phone. Forensic experts confirmed that the timestamp placed the recording mere minutes before the murders. The presence of Alex's voice, calm and unhurried, contradicted his claims that he hadn't been near the kennels that night. As the evidence mounted, law enforcement faced growing criticism for their handling of the case. Some questioned why it took months for Alex to be formally named a suspect, while others pointed to the Murdaugh family's history of avoiding consequences. Yet, despite the challenges, investigators pressed forward, determined to uncover the truth. By September 2021, the walls were closing in on Alex. His financial crimes were exposed, his alibi was in shreds, and forensic evidence placed him at the scene of the crime. The once powerful patriarch of the Murdaugh family was now at the center of a spiraling investigation that seemed to grow darker with every revelation. The investigation into the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh was far from over, but one thing was clear: the carefully constructed facade of the Murdaugh dynasty had been shattered. And as investigators dug deeper, they would uncover even more secrets, secrets that would change everything. This was no longer just a case of murder. It was a case of power, corruption, and betrayal, with Alex Murdaugh standing at the center of it all. By the time Alex Murdaugh walked into the courtroom for his trial, the nation was watching. The once respected lawyer, the head of a family synonymous with power in South Carolina's Lowcountry, now stood accused of the unthinkable, the murders of his wife, Maggie, and son, Paul. The trial, which began in January 2023, was more than just a legal proceeding. It was a spectacle, a public unmasking of a man whose carefully curated image had unraveled in the wake of tragedy, lies, and scandal. The prosecution was ready to lay bare the depth of Alex Murdaugh's deception, while the defense sought to poke holes in a case that had captivated and divided the public. The state's case was built around a chilling narrative of motive and opportunity. Prosecutors argued that Alex Murdaugh's financial world was crumbling. Years of embezzlement from his law firm, stealing millions from clients, and spiraling debts had finally caught up to him. On the day of the murders, Alex had been confronted by his law firm about missing funds. Prosecutors alleged that he feared exposure and ruin, not just financial, but personal and professional. The Murdaugh name, revered for decades in South Carolina's legal circles, was on the brink of disgrace. According to the prosecution, Alex killed Maggie and Paul to create a diversion, to buy himself time and sympathy by portraying himself as a grieving husband and father. Prosecutors pointed to the crime scene evidence, particularly a Snapchat video on Paul's phone taken minutes before the murders, as proof that Alex was at the kennels, contradicting his initial claims. The video captured Alex's voice, unmistakable to those who knew him, and placed him at the scene. This, combined with gunshot residue found on Alex's clothing and the missing family-owned firearms, painted a damning picture. The defense, however, argued that the state's case was built on circumstantial evidence and conjecture. They painted Alex Murdaugh as a flawed man, a man who had made serious mistakes in his financial dealings, but maintained that he was incapable of such a heinous crime. They pointed to the lack of concrete evidence tying Alex directly to the murders. The murder weapons were never recovered, and no forensic evidence definitively linked him to the shootings. The defense also suggested alternative theories, hinting at enemies Paul may have made due to the fatal 2019 boat crash or other unknown assailants targeting the family. After weeks of testimony, forensic analysis, and emotional witness accounts, the jury reached a verdict. On March 2, 2023, Alex Murdaugh was found guilty of the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. The decision came after just 3 hours of deliberation, a swift conclusion that underscored the strength of the state's case. Alex Murdaugh was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In his sentencing, the judge described the murders as the most troubling case he had ever presided over, remarking on the sheer betrayal and brutality of the crime. The verdict sent shockwaves through South Carolina and beyond. The community, once tightly knit and bound by respect for the Murdaugh name, was left grappling with disbelief. How had a man who seemed to have everything, a loving family, wealth, and influence, fallen so far? The trial and its revelations dominated headlines, sparking nationwide discussions about power, privilege, and justice. Many saw Alex's conviction as a rare instance of accountability for a man whose family had wielded so much influence for so long. Others, however, wondered whether justice had truly been served, with some lingering questions about the case left unanswered. Public reactions were polarized. Some saw the guilty verdict as a victory for the legal system, proof that no one, not even a Murdaugh, was above the law. Others lamented the tragedy of a family destroyed, with Alex now imprisoned and Maggie and Paul lost forever. The fall of the Murdaugh dynasty became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how power and privilege can breed secrecy and how the pursuit of justice can uncover even the darkest truths. As Alex Murdaugh begins his life sentence, the echoes of his family's once gilded legacy linger in the halls of South Carolina's courts and in the memories of those who followed the case. The trial is over, but the story of Alex Murdaugh will remain a chilling chapter in the annals of American true crime. The case of Alex Murdaugh is more than a story of murder, it's a story of power, privilege, and the unraveling of a dynasty. For decades, the Murdaugh family wielded influence over South Carolina's Lowcountry, a legacy built on law and justice. But as the trial revealed, that same power allowed corruption to fester, unchecked, for years. This case forced the community, and the nation, to confront uncomfortable truths about the justice system. How could one family hold so much sway? And how many warning signs were ignored because of their influence? The trial shined a spotlight on systemic flaws, raising questions about the role of wealth and privilege in shielding individuals from accountability. Lingering mysteries remain. The deaths of Stephen Smith, Gloria Satterfield, and Mallory Beach, all tied to the Murdaugh family in some way, continue to haunt the public consciousness. Were these tragic coincidences, or do they point to a deeper pattern of misconduct? Investigations into Alex Murdaugh's financial crimes also continue, promising further revelations about the web of deception he wove over decades. The community once placed its trust in the Murdaugh name, but that trust has been shattered. Residents are left grappling with the fallout, questioning the very institutions that were meant to protect them. Yet, amidst the pain and betrayal, there is a lesson, a reminder that even those who seem untouchable are not above the law. The case of Alex Murdaugh has left an indelible mark on the fabric of South Carolina's Lowcountry. It is a testament to the power of truth, the resilience of justice, and the importance of holding those in power accountable. Because in the end, no dynasty, no matter how influential, is immune to the consequences of its actions. The story of Alex Murdaugh is one of power, tragedy, and betrayal. From the heights of influence to a life sentence for the murders of his wife, Maggie, and son, Paul, his downfall marked the end of a family legacy that once seemed untouchable. The shocking revelations of financial crimes and mysterious deaths exposed a dark undercurrent beneath the Murdaugh name, leaving a community forever changed. What do you think led to the downfall of Alex Murdaugh? Was it greed, desperation, or something deeper? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into true crime. Thank you for watching.